Coming up next, the state of Delaware has a budget shortfall. Will the new governor raise taxes? We ask Governor-elect John Carney. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti, and we are honored to be joined by Congressman John Carney, who is the governor-elect of Delaware. First of all, sir, thank you and congratulations.
Thanks very much. It's great to be with you today.
So you hit the ground running. You've already made a couple of cabinet announcements. You have kept Jennifer Cohen on as Transportation Secretary, and you've kept Jeffrey Bullock on as Secretary of State. Why did you make that decision to keep them on?
Well, in the case of Jen Cohen, I've heard more positive things about her and her work. She's only been secretary there for a couple of years, from Democrats and Republicans, upstate and downstate, which is very unusual, frankly, for a Secretary of Transportation. So that was an easy decision. Jeff Bullock I've known for a long time. He's done a tremendous job as Secretary of State, and it's great to have him as part of our team as well.
Most people pick somebody new. Most people want to have their own selections in office, if only to show that there is going to be a change of administration and a change of direction. Does this signal there's no change of direction?
Oh, no, absolutely not. We've got to do things differently. One of the big challenges that we face right in the first 6 months is a significant budget deficit, something in the order of $350 to $400 million. And my finance team will be completely new. Mike Jackson was announced in that first round of appointments. He's got tremendous respect on both sides of the aisle as well, in the House and in the Senate, and he's going to do a great job for us. We got a lot of very difficult decisions to make right here in the first 6 months, and Mike and our new finance secretary, which we will announce shortly, will be part of that team.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to spend the next few minutes talking about it, because I do think, as you pointed out, it is probably the biggest hurdle, the biggest concern in the state. I want to look back for a second, though, because it seemed like this happens every year. There is a projection of revenue, and then it falls short. What has been the problem? Because that needs to be fixed, does it not?
Well, the biggest problem right now for the state of Delaware, it's not unlike the challenges that face most communities across our country, is that our basic economy is in transition, and it's accelerated in recent years. The transition from a more industrial economy to a startup innovation economy, right? So in our state, we had 2 automobile manufacturing plants that closed 2009, 2010. Those were thousands of jobs for middle-class families. I grew up in a little town on Claymont, right on the Pennsylvania border, near an industrial complex that runs from the northern boundaries of the city of Wilmington up into Marcus Hook, southeastern Pennsylvania, into Philadelphia. They used to provide thousands of jobs for Delawareans and Pennsylvanians and people that live in South Jersey as well. Not as many of those jobs, although increasing on the other side of the border. So we have got to, and that has had a real impact on the revenue that the state collects. So at a time when healthcare costs are going up, the cost of doing business, number of school children has increased in the state of Delaware. Our revenue framework, our revenue trajectory has been slower and flat, and that's the big challenge. So the deficit widens each year.
I understand. I understand what you're saying about the overall problem, but these are year-to-year estimates. This isn't a long-range estimate. It's year-to-year, and it always falls short. It's almost as if there's this false promise of revenue that never comes through.
Well, actually, if you look back over time, I used to be Secretary of Finance, so I know the history. The revenues tend to lag on the way down in an economy that's softening, and they lag on the way up. This is a little bit different because our economy has been steady, not in recession, kind of moving along in a positive direction, but the revenue has lagged a little bit behind. Expenses, though, are outpacing that. So when you talk about the revenue estimates, we're not the group that's an objective group, academics, economists, business people, labor that sit on the committee that makes the estimates. I don't know that they've fully gotten their arms around what's happening in our economy and forcing tax revenues down.
What taxes are you looking at now?
We're looking at the whole framework. And by the way, it started before I was elected governor. The former governor and the General Assembly established a task force to look at all these revenue sources. and to determine which were the too volatile, and they've eliminated, they've already reduced the reliance on corporate income tax, which for a tiny state like Delaware is a really small number, and it's very volatile and hard to predict. And so it's something that we really shouldn't rely on much, and in order to keep some of the businesses here, that's the main reason. But in terms of what we've been talking about in revenue estimates, it's not a revenue source that's stable and helpful.
I know you're saying everything's being looked at, but I want to key in on one tax, only because consumers and taxpayers always think about it first, and that is the gas tax. It's popped up in New Jersey. You talked about being competitive. It's much higher in New Jersey now. Pennsylvania, it's going to go up again. Is that on the table? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I expected that the gas tax would be part of our initial discussions, but the state put in place a new revenue package a couple years ago that mostly involved fees at the motor vehicle in terms of registration fees and the like. That has given the Department of Transportation revenue adequate to their ability to get the projects out the door. So I've been informed that we don't need additional revenue at this time, and so our focus will be on the general fund and not as much on the Transportation Trust Fund. They fixed that revenue problem, at least for the short term, a couple years ago with that revenue package. But you're right, and then that's what we have to look at in the whole revenue package. How do we compare with states around us, particularly since we're so small?
And so no matter what the tax is raised, and I know you said everything's on the table, so I'm not going to get into specific taxes. You just want to make sure, and I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, you just want to make sure your taxes are less than all of the surrounding states?
Or competitive. And the reason is this: the best way to fix a budget deficit is to have your economy grow out of it. And so it's counterproductive to raise a tax that's going to make your state less competitive, because you'll lose business, right? The objective should be to attract businesses and to create an environment where businesses can grow, produce jobs and income, which results in tax collections for the state. And so you have to be smart about it when you fix a fiscal problem like we have now. And when I talk about a revenue reset, that's exactly what I mean. And it ought to be, the primary purpose ought to be to make us competitive and pro-growth, because the best way to fix a deficit is to have your economy grow out of it. Now, there are certain things that we talked about earlier in terms of abandoned property escheat and the unsustainability of that, and as well as the gambling revenue, that just have to be fixed.
All right, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your time today. We hope
Great
to
be
talk
with
again.
you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Good luck to you. The Delaware Way continues right after this.